What's up, everybody? This is Jason from MainstreamGeek.com, and you're listening to the Mainstream Geek Podcast for February 5th, 2016. Happy Friday, everybody. Before we get started, I just want to make sure that you guys have all either gone to iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, YouTube, searched for the show, found the show, were able to subscribe to the show. If you have already subscribed to the show in one of those ways, make sure you're leaving a rating, a like, a review, however they do it on that site. Leave me that kind of feedback. It helps me get found, helps me get rated, helps me attract new listeners. So please, if you're listening to the show and you're enjoying the show, make sure you're subscribed. Make sure you're leaving a rating and review. Make sure you're leaving a like. Whatever they let you do on the site you're listening to it on, do that. With that, let's get into some news. A real quick one to get us started today. Netflix might take on Young Justice Season 3. This is great news. In my personal opinion, this is one of the best comic book TV series of all time. Right up there with Batman, the animated series from the 90s, and X-Men, the animated series from the 90s. It was so true to the source material and brought the comic book series to life in a way that you really got to see the pages from the comic book come to life. It was made for kids, but it was like a Pixar movie in the way that kids could enjoy it, but adults could also sit there and watch it and really kind of get jokes that the kids wouldn't get, and the kids could still enjoy what their part of it was. It's just a great show. But unfortunately, as it goes with shows, the show is cut short due to poor toy sales. It's crazy, yet understandable, that after all these years, a show's longevity is still connected to toy sales. Considering that toy sales, aside from toys made for collectors, seem like they're more of an afterthought than anything these days. Think back to when you were a kid, myself being a kid in the 90s, toys always had these epic commercials with these elaborate play sets of cities built to showcase the mood of the series that the toys were based on. I remember seeing these commercials and always wishing I could have the mock city streets that were showcased in these commercials. If you want a good trip down memory lane, I would highly suggest going to YouTube and looking up toy commercials from the 90s and seeing the list of compilations they have. There are a lot of great memories there. But I can't remember a toy recently, even with all of the blockbuster movies coming out, that have toy lines that are big. Even with Star Wars, I'm not seeing any toy commercials. And Star Wars toys are always a big hit. So I didn't know toys were still a big thing with the advent of cell phones and games on cell phones and things like that. But the show Young Justice was cut short due to poor toy sales. But this week, with the release of Young Justice on Netflix, the creator Gret Weissman tweeted that you could now watch the series on Netflix, and if you wanted a third season, it was possible by watching the series as much as possible, and Netflix would possibly renew the show. This is a reoccurring trend that Netflix is going with. Look at, Arrested Development is a great example of this. It had 3 seasons. It was cut short because of poor ratings, and because of the reaction of Arrested Development on Netflix, it was given a 4th season. Now it's going to have a 5th season. Alongside that, we now have a Full House reboot coming out called Fuller House. I don't even know who wants that. Is the original Full House even on Netflix? I'm not sure. I don't think it is, because I feel like that would be something that you would have heard a lot about, like when Friends came out on Netflix. Or this other one, The Gilmore Girls is now getting a reboot series, not a reboot, but a continuation series on Netflix because of how well received The Gilmore Girls being released on Netflix was. It's one of these interesting things where if they were to at least bring it back as a movie, say an hour-and-a-half long animated movie, just to close out the cliffhanger that Season 2 left us with, and maybe leave that movie open to continuing the story, that would at least give the fans of the show a close to the story that they didn't get to actually close out with Season 2 because they assumed the entire time that there was going to be a Season 3 of the show, meaning that they more than likely already have an idea of where the plot line was headed. DC makes a ton of really crappy animated movies. For example, there's so many of them, but off the top of my head, Battle for Atlantis. Really terrible movie. It's universally understood that it was terrible, but it was still made because there's money to be made due to the built-in fan base of this type of material. Why wouldn't you at least give a show that everyone loved a closing like it deserves? Were you guys fans of this? Would you like to see Young Justice get a 3rd season? Let me know on Twitter and Facebook at Mainstream Geek, or email me at jason@mainstreamgeek.com. What else do we have going on today? It was announced that not only are we for sure getting a follow-up to Fast and the Furious 7, but we will also be getting a Part 8. Not only that, but we will also be getting a Part 9 and a Part 10. That's right, folks. In 2017, we will be getting Part 8 of the hit series, followed up by Part 9 in 2019, and in 2021, we will be getting the 10th installment of the Fast and Furious franchise. I have to say, this makes complete sense. In 2015, Furious 7 brought home, for accuracy, Let's look it up. Let's see here. Yeah, Jesus Christ. It's insanity. Furious 7 made $1.516 billion. That is billion with a B at the worldwide box office. Now, granted, 77% of that seems to have come from overseas, with the vast majority of that coming from China with $390 million, which is the highest grossing American movie ever in China. And that's about $40 million more than the movie made in America itself. So the movie did pretty well in America, but the real money came from overseas. Now, you can sit here and you can say that the only reason the movie did so well was because of the death of star Paul Walker during the filming of the movie, which, I'm not going to lie, that had something to do with the success of the movie. It definitely brought more people to see the movie than would have gone to see it without that happening. But if you look at facts, he had several movies that were in the can, as they say, meaning that sometimes in Hollywood, a movie will be made, but when it's time for it to come out, the production company or the studio can't think of a way to market it, to sell it to the public, so they put it on the shelf until the time is right to release that movie. Sometimes that's a few years down the road, sometimes that's never down the road. It just so happened with these other Paul Walker movies, the right time to release it and the easy way to market it was by using his death. But those movies didn't do so well. They actually kind of bombed at the box office. So you can say that it had something to do with the death of Paul Walker, but I'm going to have to say you're wrong about that. So why did Furious 7 do so well, you ask? Well, let's take a look at the history of the series. It started out back in, I think it was 2000 or 2001. I was fresh out of high school, so it was either 2000 or 2001, right around that time, and it was actually a remake of Point Break. And you can fight it as much as you want, but it pulled off remaking Point Break way better than the actual 2015 remake of Point Break ever could. It was a huge hit. I remember everyone, including myself, loving that movie. We all left the movie with an urge to get in our cars and drive really fast. And for my dollar, any movie that can get you that hyped up when you leave it is a good movie. So the first Fast and Furious movie was a good movie, but it had two less successful sequels that followed it. By the way, saying less successful is being kind. Too Fast, Too Furious was a terrible movie, and Fast and the Furious Tokyo Drift was a sequel that can only be compared to Halloween 3, Season of the Witch. It had nothing to do with the original two movies, and it was a play to squeeze more money out of the franchise's name. Tokyo Drift was later retconned to fit the story of the follow-up movies and fit in the timeline in a strange, non-linear way, but we can all agree that it was awful no matter how well they made it fit later on in the series. But in 2009, something clicked and Universal realized that they had a potential action franchise on their hands. So they did sort of a soft reboot on the series and came out with Fast and Furious, which is basically the same title as the original movie, but a little different, a little more streamlined. This took the story in a direction that strayed away from the street racing storylines of the originals and moved more towards a high-octane adrenaline action movie, keeping the original characters and introducing some new ones to help further the story along if they decide to stray from the main characters in the future. And they followed that up with sequels all the way up to Furious 7. All of these movies have been extremely successful, each one growing beyond the last. So the series is probably one of the only series that has successfully reinvented itself 4 movies in and became a bigger hit than it ever was to begin with. I know it's fun to shit on the meathead vibe of the movies, but I have to be honest, I hadn't seen any of the movies beyond Part 2 until Furious 7 came out and became so successful. This made me want to go back and see what the big deal was with the series, and as I watched them, I can't say they were great movies, but I got their appeal. You were never bored during them, the action scenes were always fast-paced and kept you wanting more. I'd even go as far as to say that they were good movies for what they were. So even beyond the $1.5 billion box office, I understand why they'd want to go on with the series. Like I always say, you can't make a good movie based solely on dollars and cents, but dollars and cents are what makes movies in the studio's eyes. And without movies like the Fast and Furious series making so much money, the studios wouldn't have extra money to make the smaller, more critically acclaimed movies that everyone loves. Hollywood's an ecosystem like that. Now, as far as how Vin Diesel is going to have time to make these movies, I have no idea how that's going to go. They're set to start filming Furious 8 starting in, let me get my facts straight here, April. But just Tuesday, Vin Diesel announced that he started filming a follow-up to his other franchise from the early 2000s, Triple X. He also has to film Guardians of the Galaxy 2, though he's only a voice in that one and he only says one word in different tones, so that won't be such a hard one to film for him. But he's also rumored to play Black Bolt in another Marvel property, The Inhumans. Which is funny, because if it's true, in one Marvel movie he'll be playing a voice of a CG character in Groot, And in another, he'll be playing an actual on-screen character who doesn't get to speak. So that's kind of a funny dichotomy to have going there. But another star of the Furious movies that has a super busy schedule for this timeline to work is Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, who, as in the same timeline of the upcoming Fast and Furious movies, he'll be starring in 9 movies, including Shazam for DC, a Baywatch film adaptation, and a film adaptation of the 1980s video game Rampage. So as to how these guys have time to make movies with schedules like this, you've got me. What do you guys think about us getting 3 more Fast and Furious movies? Do you think they're beating a dead horse at this point? Let me know on Facebook and Twitter at Mainstream Geek, or by emailing me at jason@mainstreamgeek.com. What else is going on in the world? Here's an interesting one. They've announced that Flash and Supergirl will be having a crossover episode set to debut on March 28th. If you're listening to this, I'm sure you're in the same boat as everyone else. The Flash is great. The storyline is very well put together, and they've somehow found a way to fill a full 23-episode network season with totally watchable content, all while delivering a plot arc that is easy to follow and pays tribute to the original source material. But I haven't seen the Supergirl show. Could one of you guys tell me if it's worth my time to watch? I'm not opposed to it, but there's really only so much TV I can commit myself to getting caught up in. And between the shows I already watch and producing 3 hours of content for 2 podcasts during the week, plus having a wife, dogs, a job, and trying my best to maintain somewhat of a social life, time is kind of a commodity that I'd rather not invest in a shitty show if not needed. So hit me up on Twitter and Facebook at Mainstream Geek and let me know if Supergirl is something I should be watching. Also, let me know if reviews of Flash, the TV show, is something you'd be interested in having me do on this show. Or any TV show for that matter. But anyhow, Flash will be on Supergirl. And I really only bring this up because I have a question for those of you who do watch the Supergirl show. That question being, how does this work? Are the characters from Flash and Arrow part of Supergirl's world? If they are, how are they going to go about doing this on a regular basis, being that Flash and Arrow are in the CW and Supergirl is on CBS? I'm very interested in getting feedback on this one, guys. So if you could, please fill me in on Facebook and Twitter at Mainstream Geek or by emailing me at jason@mainstreamgeek.com. All right, at this point, let's jump into some listener mail. Listener Ben writes, Jason, I started listening to your show this week and I went back through your episodes. I like the length because they were just long enough to get me to work and then sometimes home. So kudos on that. My only real criticism is that you seem focused on what you would like to see a lot more than just delivering news stories. Why is that? Do you plan on doing anything in the future besides headlines? Thanks for doing the show. Keep it geeky. Thanks, Ben. I guess the real reason behind me stating my opinion would be that it's my show. And in order for it to be my show, I have to inject my personality into it as much as possible. I don't have any sources of my own besides going to websites and seeing these stories just like everyone else. I live in Ohio, not LA, so I don't really have connections to the movie industry, so I can't really break news on my site. My site is not going to be a news breaking site. It's just not a thing that's really feasible to do when you live in Ohio. So if I just went through news stories and read them, then it would pretty much be plagiarism at that point. And plagiarism wouldn't be cool. Also, if I just read news stories, then that's not really doing the show itself any service because it's not unique content. I guess I feel like for a show to exist and be worth listening to, it just has to have its own unique point of view. And since this is my show, I'm the only point of view that can really be had at this point, being 6 episodes in. As far as there being other content that I would like to deliver, yeah, of course I would like to deliver other kind of content. Now, do I have time to deliver other kind of content? Not without cutting out other things in my life, and those other things can't really be cut out at the moment. I have to work. I have to spend time with my wife. I have other obligations throughout my week that I have to take care of. So I can't really cut other things out of my life to deliver more content. I do make other content on the Mainstream Geek YouTube channel. You can go there and watch that. I try to put up a video every so often of theories and things like that. But other stuff I'd like to do on the show, I'd like to do episode reviews of TV shows I watch. But I'd rather have a co-host to do that. The problem with that is the people that I would like to do a show like that with don't always stay up to date on the shows I watch, and vice versa. I don't always stay up to date on the shows that they watch. So making a review show with a co-host would be kind of pointless if we aren't both watching it in sync with one another, because one person wouldn't know what's going on and the other person would. We can't have an episode discussion between two people if only one person has seen the episode. But I'd also like to do movie reviews, and I actually might start doing those as like special little side episodes. Coincidentally, on my other podcast, Completely Straight, we do movie reviews on that one for special movies also. It's a comedy podcast, but we have, like, so far we've done Star Wars The Force Awakens. We're going to be doing Deadpool, Batman v Superman, Marvel Civil War, movies like that down the line. So if you want to hear movie reviews that I'm involved in on a podcast, those will exist in addition to this podcast. So go over to CompletelyStraight.com to find those movie reviews. The things I'd like to do are really a matter of getting the format of the show down. Again, we're only 6 episodes into this whole thing, and it's taken off pretty well. But being only 6 episodes in at 2 weeks, I don't think I've found what the show is going to be just yet. Ideally, what I'd like to do with the show is every episode have a couple quick headlines of the day, then a theme for that day, every day of the week. Like, say, Mondays can be a straight news day. Wednesdays could be a TV or movie recap day. And Friday have a show be more about talking about what I'm into this week with TV, movies, or whatever in the world of pop culture. That's where I would kind of like the show to be, but that involves a lot more writing and a lot more planning and a lot more coming up with something to talk about beyond just talking about news headlines, because a news headline, that's something that I can sit down, I can read the story, and I can have my own opinion on that story and deliver the news story, but also my opinion on that news story to the audience. So that's a lot easier to come up with, to develop content for in that way. Like I said, a huge problem with developing this content is that it's a little time consuming, and I have a lot going on, believe it or not. Just getting all these news stories together and writing notes for each one, just in case I get to it, takes a few hours out of my week. Then recording, producing, and posting the shows takes another few hours of my week. It's a lot. And I'll get more proficient as I go, but it's just going to take some time. I hope that puts everything in perspective for you. I'm just trying to make this show mine, and I'm only 2 weeks into it at this point. I'm glad you're liking it, but it's really still a show that's trying to find itself at this point. Who's next? Adam. Adam writes, "Hey man, great show. I was just curious if you ever plan on doing TV show reviews. If so, which shows do you watch and which shows would you like to review? Personally, I love The Walking Dead, and based on the thoughts you've given on movie franchises and the direction they are going in, I'd like to hear some of your thoughts on this." Alright, Adam. Thanks for your email. I actually kind of just answered this a minute ago, but your question was more specific, so I'll jump into this one a little deeper. Yes, I do plan on doing TV show reviews. I watch a lot of TV shows, but not all TV shows I watch are serialized to where I feel like people who are interested in my thoughts on what's going on in a certain episode. So you have to narrow it down in that way. Flash is obviously a show I'd like to review every week. Fargo is another show I'd like to be reviewing when it comes back on. X-Files is also one that I'd like to touch base on, but at this point there are only 3 episodes left. So that might be short-lived if I even do that one. Last Man on Earth might be a good show to think about doing. Better Call Saul Season 2, I might be interested in talking about that one. But also The Walking Dead. I have a love-hate relationship with The Walking Dead. I love it because of its potential. I also hate it because of the potential that it seems hell-bent on not living up to. That's one that I definitely will be talking about because I have so many thoughts on the show every episode that comes out. Like I was saying before, 1 episode a week might end up being totally devoted to talking TV from the week. Or we might end up breaking TV talk up throughout the week to make the shows we're talking about more relevant to the day that the episode of Mainstream Geek comes out. For instance, Flash comes out on Tuesday. So by the time I get to see it and review it, the next episode that you would get would be Friday. But Walking Dead comes out on Sunday. So if I did all the stories for TV shows I watch on Friday's episode, that makes the review for Walking Dead 5 days old at that point, making it a little out of date. These are the problems I'm having with trying to plan out content besides news stories. So just rest assured, I am thinking of these things. It's just I have to figure out how to do them. It's going to take a little planning, and I plan on figuring it all out this week, actually, because The Walking Dead premieres on Valentine's Day. So I need to figure out how I'm going to go about doing TV shows this week. If you guys have any suggestions, I would love to hear from you. Find me on Twitter and Facebook at Mainstream Geek, or email me at jason@mainstreamgeek.com. Let's do one more email and then close the show out. This one comes from Damon and reads, Jason, you seem to be a guy who is into Star Wars and has theories on pretty much anything he watches. I've watched your YouTube videos on Rey, and it's pretty obvious you're on the Rey not being a Skywalker train. My question to you is, who do you think Rey is? If she's not a Skywalker, why would they make it seem so obvious that she is a Skywalker? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Thanks, Damon. Well, you hit the nail on the head. I don't think Rey is Luke's daughter. Now, that being said, I'm totally open to the idea of Rey being Luke's daughter. I just would not find that to be satisfying. Does that make sense? If she is Luke's daughter, it's not going to ruin the movie for me, but it's not going to be a satisfying answer to me. I find it to be a little heavy-handed and a retread of the story. And in a movie where the main complaint from The Force Awakens was that the whole movie was a retread, I don't know if it would be a good idea, not just for me, but publicly, to make such a big retread of the story. I also think that they're wasting a good opportunity at making this trilogy and this saga something special by making her Luke's daughter. It implies that no one is anyone unless they are directly involved in the current bloodline. And as we all know, not every Jedi was a Skywalker, because that would mean that Luke was also related to Yoda in some way, and that would be a bit far-fetched for my taste. Not to mention that if every Jedi was related to Luke, who were the students in his academy that Kylo Ren destroys? Did Darth Vader go on a wild sex rampage between episodes 3 and 6 and have a lot of children that we're unaware of? That would be a series ruiner for me, by the way, if they just inserted that in there. So it's highly unlikely that they're going that way. My thoughts on what happened with Rey and who she is go a little like this. She was a student at the academy. That's how she has knowledge of the Force and how her powers work so quickly in The Force Awakens. Then, when Kylo Ren destroys the academy, she and Luke happen to not be there for reasons I couldn't possibly know at this point. That's why she has that image of Luke kneeling beside R2 in her vision in The Force Awakens. That's her remembering when they got back to the academy and saw the aftermath of what happened. So Luke decides to hide her, and maybe some more little Jedis. I don't know. There could have been more little Jedis. This just happens to be the one we've met. But Luke decides to hide them scattered across the galaxy so as to keep them alive and keep the Jedi alive. So he puts her on Jakku in the care of Unkar Plutt, which we also see in her vision. That's a fact. She was left with Unkar Plutt, and she has her memory suppressed by Luke using the Force. And when the events in The Force Awakens happen, it kind of makes everything start flooding back to her in a Jason Bourne type amnesia sort of way. That would explain how she has the Force abilities so quickly. That's who I think she is. Just another so-and-so who happens to be part of the story as a whole. Now, you mentioned that they're making it pretty obvious that she's Luke's daughter, but are they really? Does it just seem obvious because you're going for the simplest answer? Ask yourself that and watch the movie without that point of view, and you might come to a new conclusion. That's going to be all I have for you this week. Make sure you visit mainstreamgeek.com to see more news stories and find out more about the show. Find me on Twitter and Facebook at mainstreamgeek. Email me at jason@mainstreamgeek.com. Make sure you're subscribed on all the different podcatchers, iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, YouTube, whichever one you use. Please be sure to leave a rating and review of the show. It helps others find me, and it helps me get more listeners. Look up my other podcasts, Completely Straight, on iTunes and Stitcher, and I'll see you on Monday. Until then, keep it geeky.